Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's unusually Netflix free episode, we'll be reviewing Devs, written and directed by Alex Garland, and a new comic, Friday, created by Ed Brubaker, Marcos Martin, and Munsa Vincente. But before all of that, Nick, what have you been up to during lockdown?
Well, this will be a bit out of date for our American listeners, and to be honest, I've left it a bit even for the British ones. But I finally watched Crisis on Infinite Earths, last year's. Well, okay, it actually finished at the start of this year. So yeah, the current season's Flash Arrowverse crossover thing. This is an epic 5-part spooling event in which the heroes of the many Flowerverse shows must come together to stop the Anti-Monitor, who is of course the evil equivalent of the Monitor, from destroying the multiverse, because he's an evil being who is evil, to be honest. It's really not about the deep dive into the personality of the Anti-Monitor. It's more about the fact that they've been prophesizing this event for years, and various heroes are convinced they're going to die in it, and so there's a certain sense of heightened melodrama about the whole thing. Spoilers, the one who actually dies is the one whose show is about to end. I don't want to give anything away of this month's old crossover, but that is what happens.
All right, well, that's predictable.
I mean, I'm being glib about it, but you know, the fact that they actually went there with Arrow is, I suppose, kind of a surprise. They don't always kill these people at the end of their shows. But yeah, Crisis on Infinite Earths, I haven't yet gone and watched the 2 epilogue episodes of Arrow, which I imagine will give me a bit of closure on the life of Mr. Arrow himself. But yeah, Crisis on Infinite Earths was... Yet again with these things, it very much, it homages the comics crossovers to the extent that it kind of inherits their flaws as well, which is that it's very garbled. Everyone's kind of fighting for space on screen, and a lot of stuff which probably should have been a longer or more satisfying moment is kind of snapped off very quickly. Like there's a bit where a character has to work out how to return from purgatory, and they do this by meeting another character from DC Comics lore called Jim Corrigan, who is also known as the Spectre, who is some sort of ghost superhero, a sort of ghost version of the Punisher. Actually, he punishes the wicked. And you'd think they'd have to go on some sort of quest to achieve this, but instead, literally, they're just standing there going, how do we get home? When this bloke lurches out of the bushes and goes, I'm Jim Corrigan, also known as the Spectre, and you need to take my powers and get home. Cool. And at no point has Jim Corrigan appeared before in any of the Flash Arrowverse shows. He's just there now. It's a bit like an Easter egg, except if you don't know who he is in the comics, it's not just an Easter egg, it's basically nonsensical. It's weird. So yeah, there's a lot of that sort of thing, but, you know, it is mostly because the plot is kind of secondary to the character moments, to be honest. It's mostly about how the characters react to the impending end of the various universes. Because, you know, the vague idea is that over the last few years of Flowerverse shows, they've introduced a lot of alternate worlds and realities where different people live. You know, Supergirl is on a different Earth to the rest of them because she started on a different channel, and the idea is the Anti-Monitor is destroying the Earths of the multiverse one at a time. There's lots of hopping between Earths, lots of who can we save from this Earth, lots of, oh, this Earth is this old DC show. Like, they go to the Earth where the 60s Batman show was set, and the guy who played Robin, who's obviously quite a lot older now, does a cameo and says his catchphrase. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of people from old DC adaptations turn up. Like, you remember Superman Returns, the film from the 2000s?
Yeah, with Kevin Spacey.
And directed by Bryan Singer, yeah. The talent list of that film has definitely aged well. And, yeah, anyway. One guy who has not become problematic in the interim is the guy who played Superman, Brandon Routh. And he, of course, is now playing the Atom, a less-known character, but he's very good in it, in the Arrowverse. Specifically, he's been in Legends of Tomorrow for the last few years. And in Crisis, he also plays his version of Superman from Superman Returns, because why not? And... yeah, there's the guy who plays the Flash, or what is it, Ezra Miller from the films, pops in to meet the guy who plays the Flash in the Flash TV show. Oh, and Lucifer appears briefly.
Wow, so this is not just linking up the Flowerverse, this is just linking up like every TV or film adaptation of DC properties into like one crossover special.
I mean, the Flowerverse characters are the only ones who get, a substantial role. Everyone else is very much some degree of cameo. Like, some of them just appear in a quick shot. Lucifer gets a whole scene just to, justify his having got him in from his other show. But there's like a quick shot of Swamp Thing from the current DC Universe series. There's a quick shot of the Titans from their series. There's a shot of Doom Patrol from their series. The other hook here is because they've got, as the title says, infinite Earths. each Earth is a different DC media adaptation, and they just cram in as many as they can.
Well, I mean, that's ambitious. I mean, I'm sure the fans appreciate that. I mean, that probably falls into the category of fan wanking when it's that moment of the fans like, oh, it's that thing, oh, it's that thing that I know, oh, I get that. And the casual viewer would be like totally lost. I assume when we're on a series of like whatever, 8 or something of Arrow, the casual viewer has probably dropped away long before this.
I think, to be honest, this is, I mean, in a lot of ways, actually, this is basically their Avengers Endgame. You know? This is, we're at the end of a major phase of the thing. We're going to do a storyline where the universe is destroyed and rebuilt to signify that, yes, this is a big ending, but we're still going forward, just without Arrow. Yeah, it's very much that, and it's very much using that as their excuse to have a great big fan wank.
Yeah.
Which Avengers Endgame also did.
Which it did. What you were saying before about trying to get so many characters in and they only get like a brief scene or something. It partly reminds me of some of the later Russell T Davies Doctor Who series when for the finale he would try to bring back almost like every character that he'd built up or like any substantial character. I think it's the end of series 4 when he brings back, not only obviously is it got Donna the companion and the Doctor, but it brings back Rose, Mickey, Rose's mum,
oh yeah,
Torchwood from the Torchwood spin-off show, and Martha Jones. Oh yeah, all in that. And it's obviously this was only 2 45-minute TV episodes, plus obviously a plot line involving the Supreme Dalek and Davros. And when they brought all of that together, it did feel very much that like the Martha Jones character just showed up to kind of press a button at one point or threaten to press a button, and you didn't get a satisfying moment with a lot of the characters. Oh yeah, and Captain Jack was in it,
yeah. Yeah. It's very much they're one of those, yeah. I mean, they're quite, they've been doing a crossover basically every year ever since they started having like more than one show, I think. Like there was a 2-part Flash Arrow crossover the first year that Flash started, and ever since then, obviously they've been getting more and more shows and bigger crossovers. So they do have a decent sense for these. It has to be said, this is the year when it's perhaps started to feel a bit bloated and overambitious, but there are worse things to be than overambitious, I suppose.
Certainly.
They're definitely constantly trying to push it further and top themselves, and I can't really fault them for it, even if I suspect they might have slightly overreached their time and budget this time.
I agree that, yeah, being ambitious and striving to like do better is a good thing. It's better to maybe aim high and, I don't know, have flaws in the execution of something that's very ambitious rather than just aim low and not achieve much.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm possibly mixing up this podcast with our conversations down the pub, but I think I'm starting to gently come away from these shows, to be honest. Like, apart from my beloved Legends of Tomorrow, I'm not quite sure how many of them I'm going to keep up with going forward. I'm back and forth on Supergirl, we'll see. So yeah, it's possible that Crisis might serve as a bit of an end point for me and watching a lot of Flowerverse as well, to be honest. But yeah, they have done a good job of making it feel like a jumping off point for me.
I mean, it's a lot to keep up with because I guess some of them are like 22 episode series.
Yeah, and they are, well, obviously Arrow's finishing and a lot of the others are at series 5 or 6, so surely can't have that many more years to run. So yeah, it's possible they might eventually actually start winding it down at some stage. But so far, they've started one new show last year, and, pending the resumption of Hollywood after coronavirus, they're meant to be starting another new one next year. Possibly another 2, who knows. But yeah, I don't know if I'll be watching them, to be honest. I'm starting to feel like I've seen their moves and need a break. So yeah, anyway, that's me. I watched Crisis on Infinite Earths. Alistair, what have you been up to since the last episode?
So in our Builders Netflix free episode, I have actually been watching a Netflix TV show. We've got to get Netflix in there some way, because we're not sponsored by Disney Marvel. We're sponsored by Netflix. We're just without receiving any money. Anyway, I've been watching a new Netflix anime, Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex 2045, or to give it the name it is in Netflix, Ghost in the Shell SAC_2045, which is a new anime in the standalone complex continuum of anime adaptations of Ghost in the Shell. I've been enjoying it so far. It really kind of fills the sort of gap that Castlevania left in my life after we finished watching that for the previous episode. In that they're sort of 25-minute, well, in this case science fiction animated short things. Each one's got like an action scene in it and propels the plot forwards. They're quite nice and digestible. I guess I sort of forgotten how much I enjoyed kind of something that's shorter than like a 45-minute to hour-long TV show. There's something very satisfying about these small chunks, and you can watch like several in an evening without it taking up like your entire night. But it's a good show. I'm a sucker for sort of cyberpunk and other sort of dystopian future stories. There's something quite interesting, I guess, about our view of dystopian futures and our reaction to dystopian futures in fiction as the world gets increasingly dystopian, and now there's like a virus and we can't go outside. There's something about there's something interesting in like various portrayals of the future. But yeah, this one also it's quite entertaining. There's some cool gunfights and like high-speed chases. There's certainly less, I don't know if they're aiming this at a slightly younger audience than certainly the Ghost in the Shell films. I mean, the original like Japanese films, not that horrendous Hollywood adaptation starring Scarlett Johansson, like the original like 90s Japanese films that the Wachowskis mercilessly ripped off from The Matrix. But I don't know if they're aiming the show at a slightly younger audience, in that there's certainly less of the kind of discussion of like spirituality and, you know, the line between spirituality and cybernetics and things like that, and sort of, cyberpunk forms of spirituality. It's not got that weird side that some of the slightly more bizarre cyberpunk strays into, like the kind of more sort of drug-induced spiritual moments of Philip K. Dick's original Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, or the first Ghost in the Shell film. And also there's less sort of like sex and nudity in it as well.
So it's aimed at younger kids, so there's less sex and nudity.
I don't know if it's aimed at younger kids. I think it's aimed at maybe, I don't know, like maybe... I don't actually, I get the feeling it's just, they're just trying to get away from something that was maybe reach a broader audience by having less of the kind of deep, sort of spiritual stuff. It's mainly, I'm enjoying it. I'm kind of, as I'm watching it, I haven't finished the series yet, so I'm always thinking like, is it going to illuminate that sort of slightly odder, slightly occulty sort of spiritual side that the films had? Is it kind of going to dig into something a bit deeper than kind of what is a cool show about mercenaries with guns and cybernetic enhancements? Is it going to get to the kind of bigger questions that the films got to? Maybe at this point, this TV show might not, but it's certainly entertaining, and I'm enjoying watching it.
Okay, so not as sort of talky and concerned with deep, slow characterization as Castlevania, then?
No, definitely not. Or, as I'd say, the films. So no, there's not as much sort of deep characterization, things like that. It's definitely more focused on the action. And I guess there's also the fact that it's not like a new like reset or reboot of the standalone complex. It is supposed to be a direct sequel to the previous series, although the last series was made 15 years ago. They've handily moved the timestamp forward. You know, the last series was set in 2030 and this one's now set in 2045. But yeah, it is supposed to be a direct sequel. So I don't know if the fact that like maybe they're going lighter on characterization is you're supposed to know these characters at this point, I suppose, whereas Castlevania was introducing everything from the start. But yeah, the characters certainly aren't as rich or as compelling. If you haven't seen Castlevania and you're looking for a 25-minute animated thing on Netflix, I would probably recommend that. But if you're looking for something to fill the Castlevania-shaped hole in your life and you enjoy some cyberpunk gun porn, then why not watch Ghost in the Shell standalone complex?
I know you have a special space in your heart for the old cyberpunk gun porn.
Yeah.
Is that your affectionate nickname for Altered Carbon?
Yeah, I can't remember if I mentioned this in the podcast before, but yeah, which I haven't gotten to the second series yet. We'll probably watch that after I finish Standalone Complex. But Altered Carbon is very much cyberpunk gun porn. I mean, it is trying to say something, but I think whatever it's trying to say, I kind of got a bit lost in the obvious shallowness of that TV show. Both of them are quite stylish, both Standalone Complex and Altered Carbon, and both are very entertaining. Like I say, I don't know if they've quite crossed over into the interesting experimental category that some of the earlier Ghost in the Shell stuff did. But this is certainly better than that Scarlett Johansson film.
Sounds like that was an atrocity, though.
That was pretty bad. To be fair, that did try to do the weirder side and get into the spirituality stuff, but I don't know, it just didn't work. I guess that is one of the things about this show is entertaining. It has a fast plot. It zips forward. Like each episode ends on like, if not a cliffhanger, an interesting event that propels you into the next episode. And although I think you do have to get those sort of basics right, like entertaining plot, engaging characters, before you can start being like, okay, we're going to use this to talk about something deeper, like the ghost in the machine. What is the difference between the living human spirit and, a machine, especially when the organic parts of your body are replaced by machine components. Digging into the philosophy and spirituality of that, I think, is something you can only attempt once you've got down pat, like, okay, we've got good characters, we've got good dialogue, we've got, it's well written. The Scarlett Johansson one kind of tried to go in that direction. There's also the fact that obviously it's set in Japan, the character's Japanese, and obviously they cast a white woman, so that's the obvious whitewashing of it. But also the fact that like it's just quite ponderous and boring. And not that entertaining. And the bits that are entertaining are pretty much lifted directly from the original film. Whereas the original film kind of nails both entertaining, good action, but also this interesting, like, deeper side. But yeah, the TV show is certainly entertaining. And yeah, like I say, for me, people who are interested in cyberpunk and different visions of the future, it is something of a soft spot that I have. So when I saw this, I was like, oh yeah, definitely going to make a priority to watch that.
Yeah, sounds fun. I don't think I'm quite as cyberpunk confused as you. Also, to be honest, as I think I may have said we were covering Castlevania, I haven't actually watched that much anime in my life, or anything in the anime subgenre. It's mostly just Yeah, mostly just Teenage Mutant Turtles. Most of the adult cartoons I've watched in my life have tended to be comedies.
Yeah, the Rick and Morty's, BoJack Horseman's of the world.
And yes, those ones exactly, in fact.
Yeah. I'm not a huge expert in anime. I have seen some. When I was at university, I shared a house with a guy who was really, really into it, and that's mainly where I picked up. For example, that's where I originally watched the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex TV show, the earlier series. So I'm not a huge expert, but I do sort of have a soft spot for this franchise. It's been on my list for a while, actually, as a lockdown project to rewatch the original films. A few years ago, they screened them at the Picture House in London, which was cool, and I went to see the original Ghost in the Shell on the big screen, which that was really, really cool. And if you get the chance to do that ever again, if they ever reopen cinemas, I would recommend it.
Already planning our post-lockdown projects.
Yeah, but for now, I would recommend it. I'll be interested to see where it goes. And if anyone has watched it and has any thoughts about what they make of Standalone Complex 2045, do let me know.
Okay, and our first main review this fortnight is Devs, the sci-fi thriller miniseries written and directed by Alex Garland, better known for films like Ex Machina and Annihilation, which focuses on a tech company called Amaya and its mysterious development division, or Devs, which has created a mysterious magical thing. And then the thriller dimension starts when a guy goes to work as a developer on the development department's thing, only to vanish, and his girlfriend, who works as an employee in a different department at Amaya, gets suspicious and starts to investigate the higher rankings of the organisation, including their quiet messianic leader, Forrest, played by Nick Offerman. And yep, we've seen all 8 episodes. We will probably refrain from spoiling the actual ending for at least the usual little while. Might be hard not to spoil what the machine does though, like the basic sci-fi premise of the whole thing, which is revealed in the first couple of episodes. So if you want to go completely beautifully unspoiled into Devs, maybe don't listen to this. But yes, we may spoil the basics of what the machine does, I think, over the course of the discussion. So yep, all that being said, here we go into Devs with very minor early episode spoilers from the start and maybe some ending spoilers later. Alistair, what did you think?
So the plot, as you just described it, which is a very succinct summary, does make it sound very much like a generic thriller. And in terms of thriller plotting, this isn't doing something hugely original or, kind of breaking new ground. The appeal of this show, I found, is very much in the execution. It is stylishly done. Yeah, I think the directing from Alex Garland is what's excelling here, as opposed to necessarily the writing, which is interesting because the man who began first as a novelist, who wrote The Beach, and then went on to screenwriting, including things like 28 Days Later, before becoming a director. It's interesting that actually the directing is really what shines here. I did very much like the execution. I did enjoy the show. I found it very, very entertaining. Yeah, I thought just the way it was shot, the visuals, had this real sense of creepy uncanniness throughout the whole thing that, kind of surrounded the show and sort of permeated its universe, was quite entertaining. The music was very, very good and really perfectly balanced to kind of keep you on edge. Yeah, there was just the whole aesthetic was dark, kind of techie, but also unsettling. I don't know, somewhere between The Social Network meets David Lynch. So I was on board for all of that. The plot was all right, I guess, overall. I felt I was more entertained by the first half than the second half. I don't know, again, how much spoilers we're going to go into, but I thought it went downhill in the second half. But there are some other things to like about it, but I think that's enough to throw out there.
I suspect I'm going to end up breaking out one of my critical catchphrases for this, but I personally felt this ended up being kind of an interesting failure, in that I think I probably am a very writing orientated critic, although I do agree that there are a lot of things that are executed well about this show, primarily the visuals, and the music's quite cool, and there's some interesting philosophical ideas being discussed, but I did kind of struggle to get past the incredibly rote plot and slightly two-dimensional characters, to be honest. It felt very 2020 tech thriller by numbers, fear of big tech company, with relatively little variation. I mean, by the time there was a part where she gets checked into a psychiatric facility at one stage by the evil corporation, I was a bit oh wow, we're ticking all the boxes. Will the nice yet reluctant sidekick get endangered soon? Oh, yep, cool. Yeah, it's very nice, as Alistair said, it's very nicely made, it's very nicely shot, I actually found it picked up slightly towards the end for me. What point did it go downhill for you? When was your second half tipping point?
I think probably episode 5 is where I sort of began to kind of lose patience with it. I thought the last episode was interesting. Like, it did build to an interesting conclusion, but I'm not saying it was just like all bad, but I felt the early bits on when they were kind of unpeeling the conspiracy, I was quite interested in it. And then episode 5 is the one that's mainly a flashback episode. It is a bugbear of mine, like episodes that flashback and fill in plot lines basically show you stuff that we know because what the characters already said, like flashing back to how the main character Lily met her boyfriend, who is the one who goes into devs and is killed. Yeah, there's basically a flashback filling in how they met and how they got to the point that you see them at the beginning of the show, which you know because you've seen their relationship. We understand, like, I understand they're a couple. You know, I understand that she used to be with the other character, the well-meaning, nice sidekick guy, you know, Jamie. But yeah, I understand all that. I don't need an episode that fills that in and just literally shows me what I gathered. Yeah, that's a personal bugbear of mine, flashback episode. And then I felt after episode 5, they only had about really one episode left of plot to do, which kind of basically did in sort of the final episode. And then there was a fair amount of treading water. Yeah, just lost interest after that point. I don't know how you feel about that.
I found the last 2 episodes a bit more interesting just because there was a bit more stuff tangibly happening. But before that, there was a whole episode where they just went round that bloke's house and had a conversation, which wasn't the most exciting thing I've ever seen.
Again, filling in things we'd already guessed or had told to us.
Yeah, I mean, this is a critical point which, to be fair, I read in someone else's review after I watched it. But yeah, in this show, there's quite a lot of people slowly investigating or finding out or being shown, or you being shown things you already kind of know. Like, Lily spends a lot of the series trying to investigate, you know, what's inside the mysterious devs, and all the time we're being shown it.
Yeah.
And it's a bit sort of, I don't know, I would have needed the investigation subplot to be a lot more amazingly fascinating to justify this level of, like, about 5 episodes worth of redundancy.
Yeah.
It's a problem a lot of premium telly has, to be fair. Devs has not invented this problem. The Netflix Marvel shows were awful for this. I mean, how many episodes did they have of people just running around to find out things that we could already see in the villain subplot?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really annoying way of filling up space with busy work. I mean, the thing of this show is, as you say, it's a lot more about the execution than the brilliantly original plot. So I guess that's meant to account for it. I mean, I guess you're meant to find the execution of the investigation or the execution of that flashback, which you mentioned, which annoyed me as well. I didn't mind the flashback bits with Nick Offerman, with Forrest. To be fair, they were also telling us things we already knew, but in quite an impressively harrowing way.
Yeah.
So I'm always up for being, you know, upset. So I was okay for that with those. But yeah, the stuff with Lily and her early relationship with Sergei did not need to exist, as far as I could tell. To be honest, it mostly just felt like a movie that had been expanded to an 8-episode TV show for no discernible reason. I'm not guaranteeing that the 2.5-hour movie version of this would have been a masterpiece, but I think I'd have preferred it.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there, which is one of the things is that because we see inside devs quite early on, and not only when Sergei goes in, but also even after Sergei dies, we see a plot line of the Nick Offerman and Alison Pill characters, Forrest and Claire, inside devs, and there's a sort of plot line involving some people who work there, and that just kind of removes a lot of the mystery. It might have even been a better show if Sergei had gone into devs, then just disappeared, turned up dead, and then, you know, Lily investigates devs, and then in the final episode she gets inside and you find out what's in there. I think that would have preserved the tension more of it. The show was just very rigidly from Lily's point of view. I mean, again, if I was writing this as a book, I'd write it in Lily's either close third or first person from her perspective and not vary from that. Again, one of the flaws I find with TV shows, which they could learn from books, is that this need to have multiple protagonists and points of view can sort of deflate the tension from the plot.
But I do agree that would have made the investigation less redundant. On the other hand, I also found Lily and Jamie slightly flat, tedious characters, so if the show had been nothing but them from beginning to end, I'm not sure I would have liked it more.
Yeah, that was one of the flaws, is that unfortunately Lily is not a really hugely three-dimensional character. She's given some more characterization, sort of backstory involving her family. I don't think this is a fault of Sonia Mizuno, the actress who plays Lily. I think she does a good job with the thin part that she's given. She really does sell how distraught she is over the death of Sergei and things like that. And also she does sell the fact that the experience of Sergei dying is triggering some lingering mental health issues that she has. There is some interesting stuff how at one point this is an early episode spoiler. Yeah, again, warning for early episode spoilers, she sort of pretends to have a quite severe mental breakdown in order to cause a distraction so a friend of her can steal some evidence. And she does do a good job of selling the character is having a breakdown, she is going through something quite big and traumatic, and they do quite a good job of keeping it like when she's faking this breakdown as a distraction, like how real is this faked breakdown, how a lot of that kind of the ambiguity and the kind of the way you're sort of sold on the breakdown is from her performance, I think. But beyond that, the character is not particularly complex or compelling. The writing of that character could have been better.
Actually, yeah, that was one of the best bits for that character, and the fact that it revolves around us not being told what's going on in advance is, I feel, a clue. I mean, there are a few good, twists or bits in this show. There's a handful of fun moments which pivoted the plot, which I quite enjoyed. There's a moment where there's a homeless guy who's sort of hanging out in the background from the beginning, and there's a fun twist involving him towards the end, which I somehow did not see coming, even though there's probably very little reason for him to be in the show unless he's somehow important. But the bit where he suddenly becomes important managed to completely get me.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some neat twists, and they're good when they come, but there's quite a lot of space between them. And Lily, I don't know, I mean, I don't usually try and second guess how things were written or impose my writing process on the writing of others, but Lily feels like the sort of slightly flat everyman character who I put into a lot of stories when I'm trying to flesh them out, and often end up having to either substantially flesh out or just delete and replace with someone more interesting later.
Yeah, no, I think, a character is a bit flat, and basically, she, other than this kind of interesting mental health stuff, she's very much like, she loves her boyfriend dies, she's motivated to find out what happened to him. It's not hugely complex writing. I guess the only thing that makes it interesting and unusual is that usually that's a male character. Yeah, a male and a white character, whereas I suppose they have varied it up by having a woman of colour. But in terms of complex writing, person goes to find out what happened to you, stroke avenge their dead loved one is not the most original piece of writing, and then uncovers a conspiracy that they were involved in. Yeah, it's not breaking new grounds. But yeah, which is a shame because I do think that the actress does the best she can with the part. I thought there was some other good performances in the show. I did think Nick Offerman as Forrest was very, very good, considering we're used to him doing comedy parts. But I guess the characters he's done before are quite intense. So the Forrest character is nothing but an intense, sort of slightly insane tech entrepreneur, sort of tech oligarch type character. And he does the intense, unpredictable, I'm a sort of a nice boss who wears like slacks and shorts to work, but also I could have you killed if I want, sort of thing. He does that quite well. I thought Alison Pill was good as Katie. Again, she's having a good year in being a standout performance in slightly underwhelming shows from this and Star Trek Picard. And also Zach Greener, who played Kenton, the head of security. He goes, again, good menacing character. I mean, not exactly amazing writing of like, there's an older, tough guy who's head of security who's a bit unhinged and has a very aggressive security enforcement policy that spirals out of control. It's not really original writing, but I thought the actor did a really good job of selling the menace of the character.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I thought Nick Offerman playing something a bit aggressively away from the sort of Ron Swanson persona he's ended up inhabiting in most of his parts, which I'm sure is partly because that persona is informed quite heavily by Nick Offerman himself and his actual personality. Like, I've heard Nick Offerman being interviewed when he's off the clock, or at least not performing, and he does talk a little bit like Ron Swanson. But yeah, it's interesting to see him do this. I mean, maybe he'll be the next big comedy performer to turn out to also be raking it in from serious roles, who knows. Yeah, I don't know, I think we've established at this point that the writing comes across as slightly thin, but that's not, I don't know, I guess that's not the appeal of this show, because, I mean, not entirely loving this show is actually an unusual break from the sort of premium telly critical consensus for me. Like, a lot of people I know seem to really like it. I assume they're responding a lot to the style of it, the fact that it's a very interestingly made show, the fact that it has a lot of cool direction, the fact that the storytelling has a very unique style and cadence, the fact that they're dealing in a lot of these interesting themes of determinism alongside this slightly rote plot.
Yeah, and again, going back to what I was saying about standalone complex, that this does do a good job of weaving in the sort of more philosophical side to it. Yeah, it is trying to explore the philosophy and the physics to some degree of determinism. And I felt that like it didn't really cross over into pretentious characters sitting around going, what is free will? Are we free? Or are we a leaf on the wind? Are we on rails? There wasn't too much of that as some like shows like Westworld, I think, veer into, and it didn't become as convoluted or just piling mystery on top of mystery the way that Lost did. So I thought they handled the digging into some deeper philosophy whilst mixing in the thriller plot. I thought they managed to actually do that quite well.
I was sort of at times willing it to become a bit wankier, to be honest. I was like, okay, you've got this incredibly wanky storytelling style with all these close-ups of random objects and this sort of weird discordant music, and you're using it to tell this really bland filler plot. Like, why isn't this storyline like weird and incomprehensible? I mean, David Lynch does this sort of thing, but his plots are also fucking weird.
Yeah, I'd expect it to go a bit David Lynch at the end or something like that, or even go a bit like Primer when basically they start, I don't know, introducing time travel or something later and just looping round and round and round. Yeah, actually, you're right. I think, if anything, this could have benefited from being more pretentious.
Yeah, I honestly wanted a wankier plot to go with the wanky aesthetic. Like, I was primed for a wanky plot. I kept waiting for them to somehow dive into the machine, or for the machine to start leaking through into reality, and for the edges of the world itself to start fraying or something. I kept really willing for this sort of, for determinism to start breaking down and things to start going properly fucking odd.
Yeah.
And I guess implied anti-spoilers. That does not happen.
Yeah, like I think Alex Garland did it so well in Annihilation. Was that last year released? Which again is, yeah, very much does kind of go to sort of weird and unusual places in the end and really does amp up. There's a kind of rising sense of strangeness throughout. Whereas again, one of the reasons why I didn't like the second half of this so much is I felt when it kind of revealed what it was, it's basically like, okay, the strangeness is kind of gone. It's just become a bit more of a tech thriller when you've got a company with a gadget they're probably going to misuse and should be stopped. But yeah, going a bit more Annihilation at the end would have benefited. I mean, I did absolutely love the style of this. Like, the music is great. I've been listening to the soundtrack, you know, kind of weird, like mixing in the sort of like monk-esque Gregorian chanting. There's weird fluty keyboard synth bits that are kind of like just creep in and out. There's some heavily distorted, verging on noise, weird stuff. The music is really well balanced and just to keep you, yeah, it creates this sense of uncanniness. It gives you the sense that there's like a presence and like a character to something that's like inhuman and not present that runs throughout the whole show, which obviously relates to the tech thing that's possibly watching everyone, possibly. I mean, I don't want to veer into spoilers of what the gadget in the box is that they're working on in devs, but the algorithm sort of thing that they're working on is more than a MacGuffin. It's kind of a character in the show, and it's giving this sense of presence through like the odd music and sort of odd visual style, which I thought worked really well.
A lot of the scenes set inside the devs building with the Forest character and Alison Pill and a few of the sort of lower ranking developers sort of interacting with the algorithm. Those were the best bits, to be honest. I kept wanting more of that and less of Lily and Jamie.
And also I think for that there was the character of Lyndon, which was I thought was an interesting addition to that whole plot line. And although it's good, also a trans character when it's not really a big thing that they're trans. They're trans. The main thing about their character is more about what they want to achieve, their view on the world. And I thought that was, you know, there's some progress there in representation terms. I found that interesting. One other thing I think was a missed opportunity, and this is also something I am sort of lifting a bit from Feminist Frequency Radio podcast I heard about this, is this doesn't really dig too much into the tech scene or being much of a critique of the tech scene in San Francisco. But in a kind of weird way, it sort of acknowledges the failures of tech culture and the impact they have in San Francisco, but doesn't really go into it. Like, there's a character who's homeless, there's shots of other characters who are homeless and poor people, and there's lots of stuff how the people live in their very nice San Francisco apartments, picked up by their private bus that drives them to work on the Amaya campus. They're isolated from San Francisco, but they're obviously having a social impact by driving up prices and monopolizing the jobs. They kind of acknowledge that, but don't go into it in much detail. And I mean, I kind of felt maybe like, especially as the plot moved quite slowly, maybe something like a subplot that kind of dug into the social issues of the San Francisco tech scene. I think it would have benefited from that, and also they could have gone into like issues with diversity in tech, and this kind of very male-dominated tech scene has created like problems with people not thinking through how this technology can be used, which is a theme of the show, but not a theme of the show. The misuse of technology is a theme of the show, but not one they explore enough in that context.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I found a bit, I don't know, flat and disappointing about it in some ways. Like, I don't know, it didn't really do enough to distinguish itself from other very similar shows. Like, I don't think it really had more aggressive critique about the current tech world than like a few episodes of Black Mirror have. It was very much just evil tech company led by this sort of messianic sort of awkward man, and that's kind of about it. It didn't really seem that interesting getting into the details of it.
No, exactly.
Which is something it definitely had time to do over like 8 50-minute episodes, but instead it just very, very slowly did this filler plot.
Yeah, it is like a Black Mirror level of like tech bad, or like maybe tech but too much, is very much the kind of level of critique the show is pitched at. I do feel they were trying to acknowledge that or something like that. Like, because of the music and the visuals and the style, this San Francisco they've created for the show is uncanny, odd, tinged with darkness, and there's this sense of like the sickness has crept into the world. And you could do something with that relates to rising homelessness, that relates to poverty, that relates to gentrification, that relates to inequality. You could do so much more with that aesthetic that relates to those social issues. I can believe that the world of devs is sick, but they don't explore it enough. I felt disappointed by that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. As I say, I feel like I'm on the cusp of just making the same point a lot in different ways, but yeah, I just felt vaguely that the slightly shallow writing didn't really live up to the best of bits, really. As I say, interesting failure.
I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I watched it, and it had some really interesting stuff. So, I didn't hate it. And there's stuff I did actually quite like about it, but I did feel it could have achieved more.
It's gently annoying to me because I felt like it was the sort of thing I could have really, really, really liked.
Yeah.
If it had been as good as it looks in some of its trailers, but
yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah, no.
My partner watched it with me and absolutely venomously hated it, like aggressively so. I considered bringing it on the podcast, but I thought it might have overpowered the conversation a bit. But yeah, she despised it. I did actually keep saying, you don't have to keep watching this, but by the time she decided she hated it, we got to about episode 4 and she decided she wanted to see how it ended, but she did still hate it. So there we go.
Yeah, I agree with your take there. More than disappointed than hated.
I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. That'll be what hurts devs most. Okay, and next up, we're going to talk about Friday issue 1. This is a new series from the Pay As You Want digital publisher Panel Syndicate, written by Ed Brubaker and drawn by Marcos Martin, with colours by Munza Vincente. And this is a crime series with the high concept that the hero is a sort of YA detective book character who has since gone away to university, grown up, and is now returning to the town where she did her YA detecting to see how things have changed. This is one of the only new major comics to come out in the last month or so, because the industry has been basically on shutdown because the one distributor has stopped distributing. So it probably got a bit more attention than it would have done had it just come out amid the usual glut of Marvel and DC comics. So yeah, Alistair, what did you think?
Yeah, so what I always tend to say about when we read like the beginning of a comic, such as when we read the beginning of Curse Words or Immortal Hulk, is that, yeah, I enjoyed this. My main takeaway is I'm intrigued by the story and I want to read more. As I say, yeah, this is very much the opening of a serialized story. It's not a self-contained thing in any right. There's not really, although there is a sort of a small mystery in the first issue. A character disappears, they are found. So there is a sort of self-contained story, but it's very much clearly the beginning of something larger. So, and it does successfully get my attention, hook me in and make me intrigued to find out more. And it does well by kind of dangling several mysteries in front of us. There's a more straight up crime mystery involving the White Lady, which is a character who's mentioned but we don't know much about. So there's clearly got something sinister involving that character. There's also, as you mentioned, the character's backstory. Friday, this detective, or sort of former detective, going back to her hometown where she's been away at university, and something happened clearly just before she left, and you don't know what that is. Is it something crime related? Is it something that was sort of romantic or sexual involving this other character who's introduced? We don't know. They've dropped in the first one, some characters and situation and some interesting mysteries, so it's got all the kind of essential parts that an opening should have.
Yeah, it's as you say, it's part of the hard graft of reviewing first issues of modern comics, is that they're nearly always basically opening chapters of future collected editions. So yeah, this is very much the opening chunk of the story, whose job it is to lay out a few memorable characters and a few discernible plot beats or mysteries to hook us in and get us back for issue 2. And yeah, as you say, I think it does a pretty strong job of that. I like the sort of YA detective premise. I've read Ed Brubaker's Afterword, and he talks about, the old novel series like Harriet the Spy, which is the main one he mentioned that I heard of. Or I guess Nancy Drew or something as well, who this is sort of drawing on. Although for me, the main point of reference was like Veronica Mars. Obviously that was a TV show, and I suspect a TV show which was created out of a sense of loving homage to the same things that Brubaker is homaging here. So yeah, that was the main thing it reminded me of. There's a bit where she encounters a character who she knew when she was younger, who used to be the sort of rich kid who thought he could get away with anything, and whose schemes she was constantly foiling, and who's now like a despairing mess of a human. And yeah, the character she mentions him being is very much the archetype you get in those books.
Yeah.
But it's very sort of nicely balanced callback. I mean, Ed Brubaker, I've read a lot of his work over the years. He's a very pure crime writer. Like, I've read a lot of comics which combine crime with other genres, like often either supernatural or superhero. But Ed Brubaker is a guy who often, whether he has done sort of superhero crime comics, he clearly does like to do comics for the just, straight up crimes. This is a very hard genre piece. It's very much, unironically, sincerely doing crimes.
Yeah, which I liked about it, actually. Yeah, in some ways it's kind of, I mean, I guess obviously I've not read as many comics as you, but I get the sense of like, because the comics are so dominated by one kind of genre, superhero, that there is inevitably more mashing up of genres, in that you do superhero plus horror, superhero plus sci-fi, superhero plus crime. Whereas actually to see a straight up crime story actually strikes me as something that's quite different. I mean, like we did Immortal Hulk, which was sort of, it kind of had that feel of the Hulk TV show. There was that 90s one of like Banner going around, traveling from place to place, encountering characters and solving crime or resolving a sort of local dispute. Whereas that seems like, like more of like a hybrid thing, superhero plus kind of small town crime. This is straight up small town crime story, and it's kind of got all the essential elements there, which I really liked. I definitely got Veronica Mars vibes from this. I guess I'm not really somebody who read like Nancy Drew or things like that, but which obviously Veronica Mars was riffing on. But as someone who really liked Veronica Mars, this definitely ticked that box for me.
I mean, we talk a lot on this podcast, because it's become increasingly dominant in the culture, about self-aware Whedon-esque banter, flagging up your tropes. But Brubaker isn't really one of those guys. He's unapologetic and unreferential about the fact he's just doing crime.
Yeah, which is fair enough. Although this had Veronica Mars vibes to it, I did think it was, somewhat different. I think the art was really one of the things I really liked about it. Like, it definitely had like a darker tone to Veronica Mars. There are some episodes of Veronica Mars that do go to some quite dark places, I suppose, but like I guess because it begins sort of at night and with a hunt for someone who's like lost in the woods or disappeared into the woods, there was definitely a sense of darkness to it. And also I guess with his characters lost in the woods preferring the white lady, I mean, I guess I didn't know that might have gone in as more sort of slightly uncanny direction, someone in the woods talking about the white lady. I didn't know that Ed Brubaker very much did straight up crime, so it probably was unlikely to turn out to be something supernatural, but I felt there was at least a possibility of that, or that's maybe what they were hinting at.
I mean, it could still go that way, to be honest. He's done mixes and matches in the past. He's done supernatural crime before, so I don't know. We'll see where he's going. The point is he's very much got the crime genre in him. But the art is lovely. The art is it elicits a very nice sort of specific atmosphere. Like, Marcos Martin's a very good artist for creating this sort of clear atmosphere with relatively little like effort. It's not like massively over-rendered. There's actually quite a few lines and it's quite sparse illustrations, but it very nicely captures this sort of noir crime thing and also this sort of vague horror atmosphere. He mentions in the outro that the fact that the town is called King's Hill. This is not meant to be a shout out to the surname of Stephen King and the surname of his son Joe Hill. But there is a certain sort of Stephen Kingian vague small town horror thing hanging over it.
Yeah, definitely. No, you got strong Stephen King vibes to it as well. Someone returning to a small town where, something traumatic or at least unsettling happened to them in the past has got lots of vibes of King. I must say, a town that harbours a secret. One thing I want to say about the art is that I kind of liked that it was quite cartoony, which is in that it wasn't kind of aiming to be realistic, but it still felt it still brought this kind of dark, brooding sense through to it, which I liked. And the characters were very distinctive, and there's a real kind of like strong sort of visual sensibility to it, which I enjoyed.
With lots of use of sort of sparse bits of colour, like there's lots of little spots of red and stuff, which work really well.
Or panels that are almost all black, apart from like maybe like some some footprints going through some snow or something like that, which were quite moody.
Like Marcos Martin's I think one of the reasons he's so incredibly respected is that he does a very good job of threading the two elements of, is this a cool standalone illustration and does it tell the story, and he can do both with almost every panel pretty much effortlessly. I say effortlessly, it sounds like he puts a huge amount of work in. But
well, that's real talent, is when you make something like that look effortless.
But the fact that every panel works that well is, I'm sure, a testament to how good he is and, again, how much work he puts in.
So I'm really intrigued to find out where this goes. They've certainly set up some interesting mysteries, and also even like we're not even sure the nature of the mystery. Is it the thing that happened to Friday in the past? Is it a pure character thing for how she relates to some other character, or is it something more, a different type of conflict, like a conflict against crime or a criminal or something like that? I mean, it could be a combination of both, like it is in Veronica Mars. The setup is both her falling out with her friends, but also the fact that her friend was murdered. So it might be it's likely to be a combination of both, but I'm intrigued to find out not even what it is, but also what the nature of the mystery is. I'll
be interested to see how it unfolds. I'll also be interested to see how quickly it unfolds, in that I guess the trouble with some of these indie comics is they sometimes end up having quite large gaps in their schedule as the creators have to take other work to make ends meet. But hopefully we'll get the next issue of Friday before too long.
The world is in a very strange place right now. I mean, the comic industry seems to have kind of ground to a halt. So maybe that means at least the fact that Friday has come out means more will come out.
Yeah, I mean, I live in hope that, even if the creators are stuck for anything else to do, maybe they can be getting ahead on Friday. Yeah, I don't know. The comic distribution is meant to be picking back up in about a week and a half to whatever stores are open. No idea how that'll affect all this. But yeah, for anyone who wants to join us on Reading Friday, irrespective of the state of the comic industry, you can get it from panelsyndicates.com, and it's pay what you want for the PDF. So yeah, pretty accessible as comics go.
Yeah, and I would recommend it. I definitely enjoyed reading this. It was quite nice and different. I've been reading, as we said, I've been reading Doom Patrol, which I did enjoy, but it's nice also to have a change of gear from Doom Patrol, which is very odd, to actually going back to something that's quite earthy and like sort of crime-based story actually works really well. So yeah, so I recommend this.
Yeah, no, it's fun with comics that, just take off into space and try and portray weird abstract concepts like Doom Patrol does. But yeah, I think it's nice as well to have these comics that do just tell a grounded story beat by beat.
That's all we have time for in this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, as it helps other people find out about the show. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find other episodes of this podcast, bonus audio clips, and short written pieces by Nick and myself.
Or if you want more up-to-the-minute updates, you could also go to our various social media accounts at MFV Podcast on Twitter, or just search Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook, where we will post the latest news on our current pop culture opinions and when the next episode is coming out. And if you want even more from me personally, you can follow me on Twitter as @NickMB, and you could also go to my website at nickbryan.com for the latest on my writing and such.
I've been Alistair Ball. You can follow me on Twitter, where I'm at AlistairJRBall, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. Thanks for listening. Join us in our next episode, where we will be reviewing the first series of the new Star Wars TV show Mandalorian. Now that it's all available in the UK, we're going to do the whole thing. And then we'll also be reviewing Extraction, starring Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth. Join us in 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Bye. We may spoil the basics of what the machine does, I think, over the course of the discussion. That's fair, isn't it?
That seems fair to me. Yeah, I mean, it's revealed quite early on. It's not like a...
Yeah, but I guessed it after, episode 1, but then again, I'm a genius. Did I cut that out?